Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us as we have talked about the impact of incarceration on children and families and caregivers, and thinking with us about the ways that we can serve and work with families more effectively around this issue and work and partner with other agencies. We're going to go over just a few closing remarks to think about this as a system and to also think about this as an issue that is being addressed statewide through agencies and through other avenues. It's been mentioned that this is an issue that disproportionately affects certain communities, particularly racial ethnic minority communities. In thinking about helping families, we also have to, as social workers and social service providers, think about the bigger picture. What's needed to really address this issue systematically and to ensure that families have what they need in the long term as well as the short term. We may not think about that in case planning, but it's important to have both viewpoints operating. And with communities that are disproportionately affected by incarceration, there can be some benefit, great benefit to working with communities and with community leaders to try and address any historical trauma or intergenerational trauma that may be contributing to a higher than average rate of incarceration. This could include history of racism, poverty, specific experiences such as slavery and boarding school experiences. These can have effects over time that we might not see and think about in cases, but thinking about it as a whole helps us think about how we can address this throughout the state. Another important point to think about is that this has an ongoing impact on parents. And people have mentioned how this affects housing as well as financial issues and debt loads and so forth. It also affects employment opportunities. Most employers can ask about felony convictions and can refuse to hire based on the result of a criminal background check or disclosure. There is a resource, the Employment Security Department does have a specific division to help offenders find employment, and please look for that on the resource list. And again, it can affect housing and education. Due to this, we need to think creatively and think cross systems to try and ensure that every available avenue is explored to try and provide those services. Currently, at least 13 states are working on this issue, meaning services to families of the incarcerated and trying to improve policies and services statewide. There's also a new national initiative from the Council of State Governments, and the Governor's Office of Washington State is involved in that initiative. There's also federal initiatives that have contributed to this dialogue, including Mentoring Caregivers' Choice, mentoring funds for children of incarcerated parents, offender reentry services and healthy marriage initiatives. There's also a federal resource center called the Family and Corrections Network, and again, that's on the resource list. There's also increasing involvement of national foundations in this issue. Now, Washington State is fortunate to have had some legislation to address these issues. In the 2005 legislative session, House Bill 1426 was passed, which directed the Department of Corrections, in partnership with DSHS, to establish an oversight committee to develop a comprehensive interagency plan to provide necessary services and supports for children in Washington whose parents are incarcerated or in a jail or a prison. The Oversight Committee developed a report to the legislature which include the following recommendations: a policy-level position within DOC, data collection on this issue, development of arrest protocols, education and training of human services staff, child care during court proceedings, inside-out family resource centers, to increase the contact between parents and children and rates of reunification, and to promote family economic stability and durable family relationships. And the link to the Oversight Committee report is included in the resource list. In the 2007 regular session, engrossed second substitute House Bill 1422 was passed, which established a statewide advisory committee managed by the Department of Community Trade and Economic Development, with representatives from DSHS, Department of Corrections, Office of the Superintendent of Public Instructions, Department of Early Learning, and other state agencies, partners, and tribes. And it directed the agencies to review policies and services, to collect data, to implement the Oversight Committee recommendations, and to provide information to report to the legislature. The focus of this bill is maintenance of familial connections for offenders and their children and families, helping offenders build durable family relationships and caring for their children, services to offenders, reduction in parental incarceration, reduction in intergenerational incarceration, maintenance of safety, and then there's a particular focus on foster youth, youth in schools, and those that receive state assistance. DSHS has been implementing this legislation in reviewing department policies and services, in assessing adequacy and availability of services, gathering data, evaluating that data, and working to adopt policies that support contact and other services. Within that process, there is a DSHS Children and Families of Incarcerated Parents work group that has representatives from each administration within DSHS. DSHS also participates in the currently convened statewide advisory committee, and also provides coordination in terms of data collection and analysis. And we're just going to note very briefly some of the recommendations that have come up from Children's Administration after internal review as possible items to help address some of these concerns internally in terms of policies and services. Some of these are able to be done currently. Many do require additional funding, which has not yet been allocated. But as you can see, the creation of this training is part of the effort to try and follow through with some of those recommendations that were developed. One thing to think about is that this is not occurring in isolation. There are many, many partners working in this, some of which you've heard from today and some of which you have not. And this is something that has come to the attention of multiple agencies, nonprofit partners, others across the state who are focusing on the needs of this population. So as social workers, you're not alone. You need to try and lighten your own workload by partnering effectively with other agencies and other agency staff, as well as exploring nonprofit community resources. And again, look at the resource guide for more information. There also are some reports and guides. One is Beyond the Walls, a guide to services for families of the incarcerated, a website for families. Again, look at the resource list. But to keep in mind that this is something that might be helpful to distribute to families that you're working with. Thank you. Thank you so much for all of your participation. Thank you so much to you, the viewer, for engaging in this process. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone with the technical staff and everyone who engaged as presenters. And that concludes the video.